Hello and welcome to another day on Iron on Issues, coming to you live on Spectrum Television. Of course, we're beaming live from the very beautiful city of Akwa Ibom State. Of course, on Iron Issues, we take you around issues, making the development and conversations. We talk about very critical issues that affect our collective growth and well-being as individuals and as Nigerians, Africans, of course, by extension, the world as a global village. My name is Francis Oyima, and I'm excited to be your anchor today, of course. One of the most trending conversation at this point in time is the advocacy and awareness for issues surrounding the welfare of the girl child. Recall, we have 16 days awareness currently ongoing that is running from the 25th of November up until the 10th of December 2023. And the theme is Unite, Invest to Prevent Violence Against Women and Girls. Of course, domestic violence or gender-based violence against women has been an issue that has been topmost on the front burner. Now, we've had different advocacy campaigns and awareness creation launched on several occasions across the continents of the world to draw awareness and, of course, draw attention to the issue of gender-based violence as far as the girl child is concerned. Of course, today we will be focusing on gender-based violence, gender-based abuses, and abuses related to the gender of an individual. We'll look at the impact that these abuses have on the girl child, by extension her personality, and of course the family and the society at large. We'll look at gender-based violence and abuses in the cultural and religious practices and setup. We'll look at it from the government perspective. We'll look at the issue of investment and how government, individuals, and non-governmental organizations can contribute in the fight to end the scourge, which of course is ravaging not just the girl child but the society. Now, we've been told that 1 in every 3 girl must have experienced some level of abuse in her life within the course of her life here on earth, and a significant percentage of that, about 87% of that, will come from point of physical abuse. You're looking at rape, you're looking at also verbal abuse that leaves a very devastating effect on the mindset of the girl child. These and many issues are what we will be focusing on, but today is all about the girl child, and particularly like for you to join the conversations, all of which you can find us on our social media platform, spectrumtvlive.ng. Of course, the phone number will be on your screen, and we have seasoned experts who will be joining us all the way from Port Harcourt, Rivers State, to deal extensively with the issue of gender-based violence and what this means. Of course, we'll also touch light on the question of mental health, because everything that happens has a psychological effect, and of course affects the mental health of the individual. And not forgetting that the problem of mental health is also a global health challenge that needs to be tackled, and all of these are interrelated. And so today, as we focus on all of this, we encourage you, especially people who have been victims of domestic abuse, to get closer to your screen and be part of the conversation. You would definitely find ways to be able to deal with the situation in your life, and of course also be able to advise and support the next person in order for us to collectively unite, fight against the scourge called gender-based violence. We'll take a short breather, and when we come back, we will be returning with a guest. Glad to have you stay with us. Of course, I had said a guest will be joining us, and we have the special privilege of welcoming live from the city of Port Harcourt, Rivers State. She is a psychologist and, of course, mental health advocate and social worker, working with an amazing foundation talking about the Center for Behavioral Change and Public Enlightenment. Short form is CEBECPEN. We're talking about none other than Mrs. Kendra Chime P. Good evening. Welcome to Ion Issues. All right. How are you feeling this evening? And how is the advocacy campaign? I know you're very, very passionate about issues of advocacy, especially when it comes to mental health, and we kind of roll out mental health when issues of gender-based violence is concerned. So how is the awareness coming at your NGO this period?
It's coming on well. Thank you once again for having me. We are actually organizing outreaches, and it will go on till sometime in December.
Okay, before we jump into the focus of our conversations, let's talk about your foundation a little bit. I mean, behavioral change, that is one of the things that is much needed in the society if the issue of gender-based violence, domestic abuse is going to be sorted out. As part of your campaign and part of the awareness, what are the programs and lineup of activities that you have going?
Okay, when you talk about behavioral change, we are targeting a very specific audience, which consists of more of teenagers. We are going to schools, secondary schools, targeting the senior secondary school students and conducting these outreaches to be very impactful for them because they are the ones who are actually entering into the tertiary institutions. Most of them may not progress into tertiary institutions, but they need to have the right attitude to survive wherever it is that they find themselves. So that's where we are focusing our outreaches on.
Okay, and of course, that is the best place to catch them young and give the right message. But of course, the theme for this, you know, days long period of 16 days of advocacy against gender-based violence is basically about uniting and investing to end the scourge. Let's talk about Nigeria for starters. What is the prevalence of gender-based violence in the country as we speak?
Come again, please. I didn't get that question.
Okay, I'm asking, as we speak in Nigeria, we know that the statistics says about 1 in every 3 women, you know, get to experience some level of abuse. I'd like to, let me come down to more on a personal basis. When last did you experience a victim of gender-based violence or abuse?
I get you. You mentioned the first question you asked. Actually, I heard Nigeria, so I'm assuming you meant its effect in Nigeria or how much we are tackling it here in the country. I think we are doing as a country we are not doing very well, but as individuals and organizations, I think we are doing the best that we can and to the best of our ability, in the sense that these outreaches we organize cannot go round the whole of Nigeria. We get a specific area and then we focus there and do the little that we can. Gender-based violence is just around us. If only we can look keenly at the faces of people who are smiling and see that most of them are suffering inside and they may not be able to open up to people because they don't want to be discriminated at. I have some in my neighborhood just around, it's usually early in the morning. In this case, it is a physical abuse. It's the spouse and the lady, and they keep fighting. And when the lady comes out during the day, she's wearing makeup and she's covering everything, but when she comes back home, you get to see the scars and all. So if we have a duty. I cannot say Nigeria as a country is doing so much, But we have a duty as individuals to do the little that we can, from our environment to our workplaces to wherever it is that we find ourselves, to be able to curtail this, from sensitizing young ones, sensitizing women, sensitizing even men. You don't cause harm to other people. You don't raise your hands on people who are not violent towards you. I don't know if I'm answering your question
Yeah.
correctly. Okay, so in my environment, it's actually much. I would say it is much. But people are doing so well at hiding whatever it is that they are going through.
Okay, now a lot of people, a lot of conversations when we talk about domestic violence, gender-based violence, it always goes back to people not being able and not being willing to speak up and seek help. What would you say is responsible for this lack of seeking for help or moving away from this abusive environment?
Many persons don't want to speak up for some obvious reasons. They do not want to be discriminated at. They do not want to be tagged when they pass on the road and people point at them and say, "Ah, see this person, she has just been beaten. They see this man, he has just been beaten." So people don't want to be discriminated at. And then another thing is the perception. Let us imagine that someone who is a graduate and should know better is the one facing a lady who has graduated and should know, and the society expects that she should know better, and she is suffering from violence. She may not want to speak up because, I mean, apart from the fact that people will discriminate at her, people will say, "Ah, you are actually educated, you should know better, you should be able to walk away from this situation." But I mean, it's not as easy as we think.
Okay, let's attempt to get into the minds of people who have been victims of, domestic abuse. What is the impact that these abuses leave on the mental image or the identity of these individuals?
Wow, it's huge. We have dysfunctional humans. When a person has been abused, the person tends to be dysfunctional, and most times they don't even know about it. They move on. Okay, let's say someone has been abused as a teenager. She goes on to become a young adult. She keeps meeting people, and she has not healed from whatever it is that she has been abused about. And then she keeps meeting people, probably damaging them alongside herself as she keeps going. You know, like I said, dysfunctional human beings, and then people who are not able to stand up to them for themselves, people who have low self-esteem, women who cannot speak out in public. These are issues that they will face when they do not heal properly. And then we have low self-esteem. Don't know if I've mentioned that. These women go about feeling inferior. They cannot take up leadership positions because they feel they are not good enough. These are what gender-based violence does to the psychology of people, women especially.
Okay. Now, you've painted the picture of what this, mean and how it impacts the victim, the women particularly, which is our focus of conversation. But how can we help these women move away from, the picture that you've painted, move away from self-blame, move away from feeling like they don't deserve it, or move away from harming themselves and being harmed, to the next person? How can we help them? Where does counseling, where does psychology, where does talking and therapy come into help?
Okay, before I go into that, let me talk about self-blame. When this happens to some persons, when this happens to most persons, actually, not some, they tend to feel like it's their fault. They tend to feel like, oh, they caused it. And someone would say, oh, because I was wearing this thing, oh, because I found myself in this environment.
Okay, but
That is why I
just
said,
before I allow you progress, streamer, is it the fault of the person who is being abused or the fault of the abuser? Between the two people, the victim and the abuser, whose fault is it?
I think it is the fault of the abuser. It is never the fault of the victim.
Okay,
No
now
matter how a person dresses, no matter how a person um, decides to look, No matter where a person finds themselves, that is no excuse for such people to be abused. There is no excuse for abuse of any kind.
Okay, now let's
So now let
continue.
me get into your question.
Yes.
Okay. Um, Someone who is blaming herself for being abused can actually be helped. This is why we should start our outreaches and orientations from families. If you have a strong support system in your home, it goes a long way to help you. You have parents who encourage you. For those who don't have parents, you have siblings who tell you, who hold your hands and tell you it's going to be okay. We are going to pull through this together. It's not your fault and you are enough. These go a long way to help you know that truly it is not your fault and you can actually come out of this. And then we have where we seek for professional help. When the support we have in our houses are not enough, professional help should be sought for. That is why we are urging people to normalize going for counseling. Counseling is not, some persons think going for counseling means going to expose your dirty secrets to a therapist or to a counselor. That's not true. People who you are talking to are professionals and they are very highly confidential people. So normalize going for counseling, normalize talking to a professional, normalize seeing a counselor or a therapist around you. It helps. Sometimes we don't want to spend the money and pay for these services, but there are still people who even volunteer to offer help. You know, counselors who work with NGOs, most of them do not charge fees. When you are going through the NGO, they counsel you for free and they are very professional people, so they go a long way to help. And then we should challenge these norms of, oh, you have dressed in a very shabby manner and for that reason you deserve the abuse you got. It is a very wrong orientation and mindset. We should challenge it and disabuse the minds of people who think in this direction. It's not helpful. It's a negative mentality. So if you go to the West where people dress anyhow that they, Western countries where people dress anyhow that they like, are you going to start raping every woman you see on the street? That's a no. It's because we are in Nigeria and we do not want to change our mindsets. So these are all the things that we need to put in place to help people think positively about these issues. And then we should join hands and make reforms, make laws that condemn these things. If we have laws that say rapists will go to jail for 14 years or life imprisonment, and then we start telling our young boys and young girls, if you rape somebody, if you touch someone without their consent, if you hit somebody, you are going to jail for so period of time, and you know how much you must have wasted in there before you come out, you must have been an adult or an old person. People will begin to people will begin to get these things into their head and they will begin to act right. So it is a duty, apart from the fact that we have a government that's not paying so much attention to these things, that is not prioritizing these things. NGOs, private organizations, and individuals should take this thing as their civic responsibility to sensitize those around them, people around them, in order to know what to do.
Okay, now you've touched that on a whole lot when it comes to dealing with issues of abuse, but primarily on the part of rape. But we know, of course, that domestic violence also spread out to actually hitting, which you mentioned in your earlier, submission this evening. Let's look at the family background, which you rightly stated can actually help people go out of it. There have been series of conversations, and we know that we exist in the African society. Now, the average African society, the average individual, the average child growing up must have experienced some level of domestic abuse, physical violence, either from the father to the mother. And then some people grow up from this mindset to become adult, while the male literally feel like it is ideal, it is right to hit the woman. The women on the other side also believe in their mindset it is ideal also for them to be, beaten as a form of, correction. You find some people, adult, like you rightly posited in your earlier submission again, even after going to school, graduating, you find them in the corporate world, you find them in governance, they are doing very well. But these group of persons are still being abused, and they feel, because that mindset, that picture had been created in their mind, that, I mean, hitting you is a form of being, a love, or some form of correction that comes from the male. So they tend to feel and believe that that is the right thing. For this category of people, how do we, conscientize them to move away from that mindset? Because it's already a picture that is, resident in their mind, an ideal picture, even when, in the society and, globally, we know that this is not the right thing to have existed.
I'm going to say here that the family has a lot of work to do. Before you think of getting married and raising children, I think we should all do our homework. For those of us who are already married and have children who are growing up, have grown and are in the streets, we have a lot of work to do. Parents, fathers, be available, be attentive, pay attention to your children, and pay attention to how you treat your spouse. The children are watching. They learn better by viewing, by seeing. It's not by sitting your child down and telling your child, oh, you have to do this and do that. No, your children are watching how you actually do those things you say, and they are learning, and that's what they are going to run with. Imagine coming from a home where the father beats the mother. The children are watching. The son grows up and thinks in his mind that it is okay because my father did it. Now, imagine also a home where the mother abuses the father. The daughter grows up and says, oh, it is okay, my mom does it and my dad tolerates it, so that means it's good, I can actually do it. Another thing is learning to walk away from abuse. As much as we want to do right and let our children watch us and see, for those who have already gotten it wrong, learn to walk away from abuse. You are not how do I put it? You are not helping your children by still remaining in an abusive relationship. Those children will suffer because you are going to end up not giving them your best. Imagine that your child sees all these things and grows up and gets married or have a partner who abuses her constantly. Because her mother did not leave, she will not want to leave. She will assume that she's supposed to tolerate and endure. And I mean, those are the things that kill people. And before you know it, you hear that this man beat his wife to death, this woman beats her husband to death. Walk away from an abusive situation. Not necessarily divorcing an abusive partner. Separate from an abusive partner. An abuse may not be in form of hitting. It may also be in form of um, emotional abuse, financial abuse, and sexual abuse. In fact, even there are others too. There are spouses who abuse their other spouses sexually. There are spouses who abuse their spouses emotionally. Now, imagine abusing someone emotionally. People don't see bruises on the person, of course. So everybody assumes this person is okay. I think that's one of the most dangerous forms of abuse. Everybody assumes, oh, she's okay, she's so beautiful. People don't know what the person is going through, and such abuses lead to depression. It affects the mental health.
All right. Of course, we're going to talk a lot more about, abuse, mental health, and of course, stigmatization, and how legislation and government, of course, NGOs such as yours, and the generality of all of us can unite to build a better society, safer for a girl child, and by extension, a female child, when we return from this time out. And as I did inform us, we'll have a second guest, still all the way from River State, joining us to continue with this conversation. Do stay with us.
is the only one allowed by grossly abused. Our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the Constitution. We do not have a federal government police force. We have the Nigeria Police Force, which shall be administered, organized, and supervised by the Nigerian police.
No, my lord, I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope of people who should be invited here for examination. My lord, if we cannot find those who literally murdered Abiola, who are those people who could be said to be the beneficiaries of the death of Abiola?
Rogers has linked you with some of the killings he did.
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My lord, the Matters Council is leading the evidence in our matters.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord, but we can't be talking about cases which are in court,
Is
my
this
lord.
an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord. These cases are in court, my lord. I'm just reminding your lordship.
My lord, sorry, my lord, I think I'll be in cross-examination.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally Speaking. Join us every
Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m.
for Legally Speaking.
Glad to welcome you back. It's still Eye on Issues, and we're beaming live from the very beautiful capital city of your Akwa Ibom State. Of course, you can catch up on our social media platform, all of which you can find on our website, spectrumtvlive.ng, to be part of the conversation. On today's edition of Eye on Issues, just a reminder that we're talking about, the 16 days advocacy and awareness against gender-based violence. My guest is Mrs. Kendra Chime, joining us all the way from Port Harcourt. Of course, we're also being joined by Mr. Emmanuel Obde, who is the founder and president, Center for Behavioral Change and Public Enlightenment. Is also the director for African National Women in Agricultural Association, USA. Of course, Emmanuel is a leader and advocator, of course, someone who is interested and has piloted a lot of awareness and advocacy when it comes to mental health. He's an award-winning philanthropist and has been involved in different policy conferences and set up to formulate policies to help guide issues that surrounds the girl child. Good evening and welcome to Eye on Issues, Emmanuel.
Good evening to you. Thank you for having me. Thank you everyone for giving us your audience.
All right, thanks for joining us. Of course, let's start. We know that you have been, a part of a lot of policy, meetings and setup. We're just speaking with one of your members, talking about Mrs. Chime now, who is still, of course, very much with us now. What are the lacunas or the lapses that we are having as far as policy formation and implementation is concerned when it comes to gender-based violence in Nigeria?
Yes, basically in Nigeria today, one of the basic challenges that we are having when it comes to gender-based violence is the issue of awareness. The people are not aware that in a society like ours, men and women will have the understanding of what it takes to have gender equality. And this can be embedded in our curriculum in school. Boys can be taught how to treat women right, how to have gender equity, how to treat every individual and everyone in the best way possible. So in terms of education, Nigeria is lacking in terms of awareness. And when it comes to laws, one of the things that makes gender-based violence to be on the increase is the breakdown of law and services. You know, in a place where, for example, someone is aware that if I rape a woman, I will be asked to pay the law, and eventually I will be sentenced to maybe 10 years imprisonment, or basically maybe a life imprisonment. The person will refrain from committing that crime. The person will not involve in rape, because you know that the law is equal to the tax. The law will be against you. So in Nigeria, yes, there are laws in various states. There are laws at the national level, but there is lack of implementation of the law because of stigma, because of cultural issues, because of religion. You know, people will tell the person, please don't talk about it, so that people will not see you as someone that has been raped. So cultural concerns, stigma, and religion is one of the basic issues. And the fact that laws are not well implemented, including awareness and lack of education.
Okay, now Emmanuel, let's talk about apart from rape. Just we're talking with Ms. Chime now. Apart from rape, we're also talking about injustice or violences that are being meted out in the name of religion. For instance, let's look at about the fact that in churches, in some religious setting. Churches, women are not allowed to occupy certain roles, occupy certain positions. Can we also say this is a form of abuse against the women?
Exactly. The truth is that if we must prevent gender-based violence, we also have to engage women, include more women in decision-making at all levels, including in the churches. So when women are deprived positions of leadership, it is a form of gender-based violence. Because if we are defining gender-based violence, it has to do with deprivation of economic, social, and some other rights, physical, and some other rights. So if a woman is denied a position on the basis of her gender, whether it is in the church, whether it is in government, wherever it is a form of gender-based violence. And we have to stop that by including more women, be it in church, in secular leadership, that is in politics, in the decision-making process.
Okay, let me come to you, Mr. Chime. I'm going to ask this on a very personal level as a woman, because we are talking about women now. As a woman, have you ever been at a position where you're being denied something you know you deserve, you've merited it by your hard work, by qualification, and yet, just because you are a woman, you were not given?
In so many instances, yes. There's one that is very outstanding. I went for a job interview. In the adverts, they did not state that they needed a male. There were so many women there and a few guys too. So after the interview, we were called in, I and the guy were called into the interview hall, and I was asked how much I wanted to be paid. I told them how much. The guy said how much he wanted to be paid, and they were like, do you know, can you wear boots? I'm like, yes, I can wear boots. What's wearing boots? And, they already know that he's a man, so he automatically can wear boots. And they were like, can you climb ladders? And I'm like, in your description, there was nothing like this job is specifically for male applicants. You just asked people to apply. And this is something that has eaten deep, not even in that place. That place was a one-man's business. Now, imagine where in bigger organizations, they downpay women just because they are women. Imagine where women are probably not entitled to cars, official cars, just because they are women, and then they give it to the guys. I mean, this thing has eaten too deep into our society, and we need to rise up to the occasion and start our sensitization.
Okay, I'll still remain with you. Now, this is a personal experience. So how did you feel and how did you cope? How were you able to move out of that environment and still have confidence in yourself? Because a lot of persons watching us could learn a lesson from your personal narrative.
For a very long time, I had low self-esteem issues. In fact, I was depressed for a few weeks after that issue. And then one day I spoke to a friend and she counseled me and I had to open up and then told her how that thing affected me. It made me feel like, okay, so I'm just going to be assigned to just clerical duties and that will be all I am enough for in this life. I'd like that's not what I signed up for. I want to achieve greater heights. I want to go places. I don't just want to end in mediocre settings, all because I am a woman. And after that counseling, I began to talk to myself and affirm that I am enough. I can do anything I want to do, and I can be anything I want to be. And this is a message to the girl child today. You can be anything you want to be, both the good, the bad, and the ugly. And my advice is aim for the good and aim to the highest you can get there. There's no limitation. Provided you dream right and you pursue those dreams, you can get there. There's no limitation.
All right, for some very passionate appeal and advice there for the girl child. But let's come back to you, Mr. Emmanuel. One of the projectors or progenitors of gender-based violence or abuses is enshrined in the cultural practices. And as far as Nigeria is concerned, some of these practices are so much found its way that it's even protected by the constitutions of the land. Take, for instance, the issue of child marriage. It is very much rampant in the north. And just going through your details, I see that your NGO has been involved in a lot of advocacy, not just within the South-South region, but also in the northern region. So I'd like to ask, child marriage and gender-based violence, the relationship there, knowing that it is deeply enshrined in some cultural and religious practices, how can we as a people, in terms of legislation and implementation now, help Nigeria, move away from this very barbaric practice, which of course some persons will always want to explain away as being a cultural practice or a religious practice, and so should be allowed to, coexist regardless of the harm it has on the girl child and by extension the society?
I did not get you right. I did not get your question right, pardon?
Okay, so I'm asking, child marriage is enshrined in some of the cultural and religious practices in Nigeria, yeah? But how can we help the people in terms of legislations? What kinds of legislations can we make to help, change the narrative?
Okay, thank you very much. I am able to understand. Actually, in Nigeria today, about 19.5% of young girls are victims of, for example, female genital mutilation. And they are also victims of child marriage, like 43.4% actually, for child marriage, are victims of child marriage. Then 19.5% are victims of female genital mutilation. These are cultural practices that are part of gender-based violence. And one way we can get these out of the way is to educate the locals. Because I can tell you that, for example, child marriage is embedded in religious belief. And the law may be against it, but for some religious belief, people still believe that, they can marry a child of 13. But generally in Nigeria, a child must be at the age of 18 for the person to be given out to marriage, for the person to consent to marriage. So one of the ways we can do this is to educate the parents to say you need to allow this child to be at the age of 18 before she can give her consent. And we also have to provide some strict measures, some punishment for people who violate the law. Religion should not be enough to dictate how things are done. The law should be able to dictate the behavior of people. And when people violate the law, they should be asked to pay the wrath of the law. They should be punished. So we have to make laws to be above religious belief and religious sentiment. So these two practices are embedded in culture and religion. And we have to make the law to be strict on them against religion and culture.
Okay, of course, making the law would mean the National Assembly being given. Now, let's talk about investment before we wrap up our conversation. Do you think the government of Nigeria and the respective states have invested enough to end the scourge of gender-based violence?
Totally no. Totally no. It's not just Nigeria per se. Globally, I think it was reported in 2021 that just 28% of gender-based violence funding requirements were met globally. So if you look at it in Nigeria, it will be worse than that. Globally, it is reported in 2021 that just 28% of the funding requirements were met. And it will be worse in Nigeria because I don't think we are even talking about this at the governmental level. I don't think there is even a policy that is being put in place to check this at the national level, even in states. The NGOs that are working to ensure gender-based violence is reduced in Nigeria, I am not sure there is any particular funding that is targeted to support the services that they do. So basically in Nigeria, the funding needs are not met, even globally.
Okay, now let's still stay with Nigeria. Recall recently, President Ahmed Bola Tinubu's led federal government have made some very strong statement when it comes to gender equity, gender equality, gender justice, and investing in protecting and promoting, the right of the girl child. Now, this is the time where we can begin to have these conversations as far as policy is concerned. Remember also the Senate President Godswill Akpabio and the Speaker of the House of Assembly have said that the 10th Assembly is also committed to giving women, their due, and conversations about the 35 affirmative action is also quarreling on ground. So what are the things that you think can be the kinds of laws that can be formulated and the kinds of investment that will help change the narrative? And let's focus on Nigeria. Of course, this can also be adopted by Africa and other African continent and other countries of the world.
All right. Basically, if you look at the issue of gender-based violence, you will see it as a humanitarian issue. It is a humanitarian issue, so we have to have laws in the country that protect human rights. We have to have laws that protect human rights, especially the rights of women and girls. Because yes, men also experience gender-based violence, but the majority of gender-based violence victims are women and girls. So there should be laws in place in the country that protect the rights of women and girls. Now, the second thing we have to do, looking beyond the law that we put in place, is that we have to put measures in place that empower women and girls economically by providing education, by providing economic opportunities, by ensuring that women and girls are not totally depending on the men. Because if you look at the issue of gender-based violence and why it happens, you find out that it is embedded in poverty. Because a girl is poor, because a woman is poor and is looking for a way of survival, the woman will be vulnerable to abuse by a man who may have the means to supporting her. And she may be vulnerable to abuse without even complaining. She will bear it. You will hear a girl say things like, because he is paying my school fees, I cannot live in, even though he is bullying me, even though he is beating me, even though he is sexually harassing me, he is paying my school fees. So the government at all levels must provide opportunities that will empower the women, empower the girls economically. There should be scholarships for girls. There should be free education at the primary level, even up to secondary school, so that girls will not be finding it difficult to go to school. When a girl is not educated, she will be accessible to anything that will come her way. So basically, The law that protects human rights has to be in place, and there should be empowerment of women and girls in terms of education and economic opportunities.
All right, of course, a lot has been stated, but just before we go, let's get the parting shot from Mrs. Chime. You've said a whole lot this evening, Chime, but just before we go, what would be your parting shot to women all over the world on coping and dealing with, you know, abuses in their respective relationship, in their workplace, and of course, in the society?
Okay, I'm going to leave us with a few words, starting from the family. Parents should teach their girl child to have self-love. Love yourself. When you love yourself enough, there are things you will not settle for. There are things you will say no to, even without anybody telling you. And then whatever affects you negatively, whatever impacts you negatively, learn to walk away from it. Do not do it like a do or die affair. Do not beg for a relationship or friendship. Beg in quotes. People beg people to be their friends. People beg people to be with them, and then they will be abused and they cannot speak out. When you find out that you are being abused, learn to talk to somebody. Speak out. The discriminations and what have you and stigmatizations they are going to be there. I mean, they are still there with us. But learn to speak out. You'll be better off speaking out than dying with silence. That's what I have to say to us this evening.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Chima. Emmanuel, let's get your parting words to the world as far as dealing with, you know, gender-based violence and abuses is concerned.
I will need this to say that the world is such a place that we all live and we have to respect one another. We have to respect the rights of each and everyone that we come in contact with, especially women, because when it comes to gender-based violence, it is the power balance. It is an unequal power balance between the gender, being women and men, that is causing gender-based violence. So we should take into account that unequal power balance and see how we can design support and intervention for women, especially people who are affected by crisis. When we do this, it will reduce gender-based violence in crisis-prone areas, crisis-affected areas, and we also have to protect the rights of women wherever we find them. Let there be gender equity, let there be gender policies that will protect both the male and the female gender. There should be laws that will protect the rights of women, and there should be laws that will punish men who in any way violate the rights of women, be it physical, psychological, and mental. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Of course, I truly appreciate you taking the time. My guest has been Emmanuel Dumele Ope, who's the founder and president, Center for Behavioral Change and Public Enlightenment. Of course, we also had Ms. Kendra Chime, who is a mental health advocate, social worker, and of course, a psychologist, still with the Center for Behavioral Change and Public Enlightenment. Thank you so much for making out the time to speak to the world today on issues of gender-based violence. All right, of course, that's the size of our package on today's edition of Eyes on Issues. My name is Francis Oyemaidet. Let's put the help that we can to our sisters. And of course, if you're an abuser as a man, then you need to seek for counseling and seek help in order to be able to move away from that. And if you're a woman who is being abused, you need to also speak up and move away from that abusive relationship. Let's all remember, when one person is abused, when one woman is abused, it goes a long way to affect the generality of the society. Wishing you a lovely evening, and thanks for joining us to enjoy the rest of your evening. Of course, continue to stay tuned to Spectrum TV as we continue with the rest of our programming.